Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about some Egyptian esoteric books, and I want to talk about these books because I want to talk about the Egyptian esoteric legacy and how important that is for the original ideas and associations with the Golden Dawn. So I'm just going to hold up the Book of Thoth here, and the Egyptian god Thoth was the Egyptian god of magic and esoteric wisdom. So the Egyptian pantheon and the Egyptian esoteric ideas and concepts were very important and quite central to the Golden Dawn. And the reason for that is because the Egyptian god Thoth was also known by the Greek name of the god Hermes. So the whole idea of Hermetic thought and Hermeticism was actually based on the much older Egyptian ideas, and there actually was an ancient Egyptian Book of Thoth that is now recognized by a lot of historians. And the Golden Dawn itself, the order was actually called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So Hermeticism, as well as Kabbalah, were very important foundations for the Golden Dawn, and then the later tarot decks that were created from that order. So I want to talk today about some Egyptian esoteric books that are quite good, and just to tell you a little bit more about some of the Egyptian esoteric ideas that I think seem to get overlooked a lot. I think the later Hermeticism and alchemy branched out of Hermeticism. Those ideas are normally associated with the ancient Greek philosophers, such as Pythagoras and Plato. But a lot of people don't realise that these ideas already existed for a very long time before those philosophies and before those philosophers. Even around the time that Pythagoras and Plato went to Alexandria in northern Egypt, these ideas were already there in Egypt for a very long time. Historians probably think up to 2,000 years before that. So these ideas were well and truly around, all about the concept of the soul, the journey of the soul after death, and many, many other ideas, many other esoteric and spiritual ideas were actually already formulated in ancient Egypt. So I wanted to just remind people again about the Book of Thoth, and this is the one that was written by Aleister Crowley, which is based on an earlier book by Samuel Mathers, who is one of the main founders of the Golden Dawn. And Samuel Mathers himself was an Egyptologist. He was an expert on ancient Egypt. So there's the Book of Thoth again. And in the background here you might be able to see a statue of the Egyptian god Horus, and that is the Egyptian god Horus in his falcon, the bird falcon form, the falcon-headed god, Horus. And I've also got a beautiful scarab here, scarab beetle sculpture. And it has hieroglyphics on the back. And the scarab is one of my favourite Egyptian concepts because it represents eternal life and immortality, the eternal rising and setting of the sun. So I really like the scarab. And both this scarab and the statue of Horus behind me have actually come from an Egyptian shop that used to be near where I live, and the shop was actually owned by an Egyptian man who travelled to and from Egypt many times and brought back these sculptures and lots of other items with him every year. So I love the fact that these things were actually created and they're actually from Egypt. And I'm just going to show here the tarot of the Egyptians. This is a reproduction by Los Scarabeo that's available at the moment based on the concept by Attila. And Attila very much was in favour of the Egyptian and Book of Thoth connection with the concepts and ideas of the tarot. Now to recommend some books. The first book I'm recommending is called The Spiritual Technology of Ancient Egypt, and the subtitle is Sacred Science and the Mystery of Consciousness, and this was written by Edward Malkowski. This is a great book. It's quite a thick book. It's still available. And this is a very interesting book because it talks about how Egyptian esoteric philosophy influenced many later philosophies after that. So there is discussion here about Hermeticism and how this also influenced spirituality and even Christianity that came afterwards. It's a very interesting book. It talks about a lot of different concepts, and I think it actually helps to inform the Western philosophical worldview. It actually explains a lot of the connections about the original Egyptian ideas and how they filtered into the later Western philosophy, the later ideas, and how it also influenced Christianity, as I mentioned, how there was this interchange of ideas. So this is a very interesting book. I think it's quite a good book. It's a really interesting book. It's quite accessible. And this book also makes an important mention of the Book of Thoth and how the later Hermetic Greek writings are very much based on the earlier Book of Thoth writings that later became Hermetic writings and Hermeticism. So it's a great book. The Spiritual Technology of Ancient Egypt. And I'll put the details below the video. The next book, I think, is probably the best book ever written on Esoteric Egypt. Esoteric Egypt by J.S. Gordon, and the subtitle is The Sacred Science of the Land of Chem. And even the word alchemy, the study of alchemy, branched out of Hermeticism. And the land of Chem, or Al-Chem, means land of the black soil, which is Egypt. So this is a fantastic book. It has everything that you would need to know about Egypt itself, the Egyptian pantheon, the esoteric ideas. There's even a diagram in here about the Egyptian esoteric concepts and how they can be related to Kabbalah. In this diagram here. So it's a fantastic book. It's still available, and the author J.S. Gordon was an expert on Egyptian esoterics. So if you could get a copy of this book, and I think it is quite easy to get. J.S. Gordon wrote other books about Egyptian esoteric ideas and Egyptian cosmology as well. So this is a great book, and I'm recommending this one as well. Esoteric Egypt by J.S. Gordon. Fantastic book, and just has so much information in that book. And the last book I'm showing is The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt by Richard Wilkinson, and this one is still available too. This is a great book to learn more about the Egyptian pantheon. It's kind of like a who's who of the Egyptian pantheon, and I think it is probably the best book I have seen about the Egyptian pantheon of gods and goddesses. And this is still available, and there's wonderful coloured pictures in here, and there's a glossary of all the different Egyptian gods and goddesses in the back of the book. And it also talks about the different Egyptian gods and goddesses individually and how they relate to each other. And there's a index at the back. It just has really everything in here. It talks about the mythology for each of the gods and goddesses. It talks about the kind of ritual or worship that was involved with each of them. It really is a wonderful book. The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt by Richard Wilkinson. So all three of these books are worth getting, and I wanted to talk about this today, about really the legacy of the esoteric concepts and ideas of ancient Egypt, because it was such an important part and an important foundation of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, who were instrumental in the creation of the Waite-Smith deck and the Crowley deck in particular. And I think that the ancient Egyptian concepts, and especially the esoteric ideas, are overlooked and not quite realised, because the ancient Greek philosophy seemed to overtake the earlier concepts. There was a kind of a borrowing that was going on, and then the ancient Greeks adapted those ideas and made them compatible with ancient Greek thought. But for the Golden Dawn, the Egyptian esoteric ideas and concepts were of great importance, and they particularly influenced, Samuel Mathers, one of the main founders of the Golden Dawn, and Aleister Crowley in particular, not only to do with the creation of his deck and his Book of Thoth, but also Aleister Crowley's later philosophy of Thelema was actually founded in Egypt, on a trip to Egypt. So these concepts from ancient Egypt were as important to the Golden Dawn as Kabbalah. They were both equally important. So I hope you enjoyed hearing a bit about these ancient Egyptian esoteric books, and all three of these books are quite accessible. They're not difficult to read. They have a lot of information, and they are also great reference books. So I'll put the details below the video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.